Ever wonder what happens when a celebrity chef and a food critic with a vendetta are forced to cook up more than just meals? Dive into Chef's Special and discover how culinary chaos and comedic clashes lead to an unexpected romance that will leave you hungry for more. Anthony Ryder, the culinary world's heartthrob, strutted into the studio like he owned the place. At 6 feet tall, with tousled dark hair that looked artfully disheveled and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you, he was the kind of chef who made viewers swoon and competitors tremble. His chiseled jawline and charming smirk were as sharp as his knife skills. Anthony ran his kitchen like a maestro, orchestrating flavors with precision. His restaurant, Ambrosia, was the pinnacle of fine dining, and his reputation was untouchable, or so he thought. Molly Harper, a food critic with a razor-sharp pen and a vendetta that seemed personal, commanded attention despite her petite 5'3" frame. Her wavy auburn hair framed a face both delicate and fierce, with striking green eyes that could pierce through the most confident of chefs. Her style was a blend of chic and practical, often seen in tailored blouses and jeans, accented by statement earrings. Her reviews were infamous, her critiques unforgiving. She had a particular penchant for dismantling Anthony's creations, dish by dish, in her widely read column, driven by a past culinary incident where Anthony had publicly dismissed her opinions during a restaurant opening. The culinary world buzzed with the announcement of a new cooking show, Chef's Special, which promised to pair renowned chefs with critics to create the ultimate culinary experience. The premise was simple yet diabolical. Force chefs and their harshest critics to work together, creating dishes that would be judged by a panel of culinary legends. The twist? Each week, the pairs faced increasingly ridiculous and challenging tasks, designed to push them to their limits and, hopefully, beyond. Anthony was intrigued, ready to showcase his genius on a new platform. That is, until he learned his partner was none other than Molly Harper. Their first encounter on set was predictably frosty. Anthony's confident swagger met Molly's icy composure, and sparks flew, though not the romantic kind. He strutted into the studio in his pristine chef's whites, a smirk playing on his lips, only to find Molly standing there, arms crossed, looking at him like he was a soufflé that had just collapsed. Their first challenge was to create a fusion dish combining French and Japanese cuisines. The tension in the kitchen was palpable. Anthony's meticulous techniques clashed with Molly's suggestions, each viewing the other's input as sabotage. Anthony insisted on a classic French approach with a delicate sauce, while Molly pushed for bold Japanese flavors that would actually taste like something. The result was a disaster, a soupy, unappetizing mess that had the judges wincing and the studio audience howling with laughter. This failure set the tone for the next few episodes. Each challenge brought new disasters: burnt soufflés, overcooked steaks, and once, a fire that nearly shut down production. Their mutual disdain seemed to seep into every dish they created, turning the kitchen into a battleground. Anthony couldn't resist a sarcastic comment about Molly's lack of kitchen skills, while Molly had a knack for pointing out every tiny flaw in Anthony's techniques. Despite the chaos, there were moments when the facade cracked. Late nights in the kitchen saw them both exhausted, their guard lowered. Anthony would find himself listening to Molly's stories about her childhood, how she learned to cook in her grandmother's kitchen, where the smell of freshly baked bread and simmering stews filled the air. Molly, in turn, would catch herself admiring Anthony's dedication and passion, even if she wouldn't admit it out loud. These fleeting moments of connection were quickly overshadowed by the next culinary catastrophe, but they planted the seeds of something neither of them wanted to acknowledge yet. Their interactions were a roller coaster, swinging from heated arguments to awkward silences. The crew began to take bets on when they'd finally snap, or conversely, when they'd stop pretending their clashes were purely professional. Unbeknownst to them, viewers loved it. The ratings soared as audiences who tuned in to watch the drama unfold. The producers, sensing a gold mine, continued to push them into increasingly challenging and ridiculous situations. Through the madness, Anthony and Molly began to respect each other's strengths, even if they were reluctant to admit it. Anthony saw that Molly's critiques, while harsh, were insightful. Molly recognized that Anthony's culinary skills were unmatched, his innovation inspiring. Yet, every step forward seemed to be followed by 2 steps back, as their professional pride kept them at odds. As the season progressed, their kitchen disasters became less frequent. They started to find a rhythm, a tentative partnership emerging from the chaos. But the underlying tension remained, a volatile mix of professional rivalry and a burgeoning, unacknowledged attraction. Each was a puzzle piece, and the edges were starting to align, though neither was ready to see the whole picture just yet. Their relationship teetered between grudging respect and open hostility. During one particularly challenging episode, they were tasked with creating a dessert menu inspired by classic movies. The pressure was immense, and tempers flared. Molly suggested a deconstructed apple pie inspired by The Wizard of Oz, but Anthony dismissed it, pushing for a more avant-garde creation. Their argument escalated, each stubbornly defending their idea, and the result was a mishmash of concepts that failed to impress. However, it was during these heated exchanges that they began to understand each other better. Molly saw through Anthony's bravado to the vulnerable artist who feared failure. Anthony realized that Molly's critiques were driven by a genuine passion for food and a desire to see culinary arts pushed to new heights. Their clashes, while intense, began to foster a deeper connection, a reluctant admiration for the other's dedication and vision. The turning point came when they were assigned to cook for a charity gala. The theme was A Taste of Home, and they had to create dishes that evoked nostalgia and comfort. As they brainstormed, Molly shared a story about her grandmother's kitchen, where the scent of freshly baked bread and simmering stews filled the air. Anthony, moved by her story, suggested they recreate one of those memories. Together, they crafted a menu that combined Molly's cherished family recipes with Anthony's refined techniques. The result was a heartwarming feast that resonated with the guests. For the first time, they stood side by side, basking in the praise, a united front. The success of the gala was a testament to their evolving partnership, a hint of the potential that lay beneath their contentious surface. The episode ended with a rare moment of tranquility. As they cleaned up the kitchen, Anthony and Molly shared a quiet conversation, reflecting on their journey so far. The animosity that had defined their early interactions was fading, replaced by a tentative friendship. They were still far from acknowledging the deeper feelings that were growing between them, but the barriers were beginning to crumble. The ratings for chef's specials skyrocketed, and the producers, sensing an even bigger opportunity, devised increasingly outrageous challenges for Anthony and Molly. The tension in the kitchen, already high, was about to reach its boiling point. The latest challenge was a live cooking marathon, 5 consecutive days of themed cooking, each day more ridiculous than the last. Day 1 was culinary circus, requiring dishes inspired by circus acts. Anthony, in his usual confident manner, decided on a daring fire-juggling flambe, while Molly, with a more practical approach, suggested a simple but elegant caramel corn dessert. Their first clash of the week set the tone, with Anthony's flamboyant dish nearly setting the studio on fire, leaving Molly to extinguish both the flames and her fury. Day 2 was medieval feast, demanding they recreate dishes from the Middle Ages. Anthony wanted to roast an entire pig on a spit, but Molly, envisioning a more refined approach, suggested a modern twist on a medieval pie. Their argument escalated quickly, Anthony accusing Molly of lacking ambition, while Molly shot back that Anthony's ideas were all show and no substance. The resulting compromise, a pie stuffed with an overwhelming array of meats and spices, was declared historically interesting but gastronomically regrettable by the judges. As the days progressed, their professional rivalry spilled over into personal jabs. Day 3's space-age cuisine saw Molly mocking Anthony's failed molecular gastronomy attempt, a blob of unidentifiable foam that looked more like alien goo than food. Anthony retaliated during Underwater Wonders on Day 4, turning Molly's delicate seaweed salad into a gelatinous monstrosity. The audience loved the chaos, the bickering, and the undeniable chemistry simmering beneath their hostility. The final day, Diner Delights, was the tipping point. Tasked with reinventing classic diner dishes, Anthony and Molly were at each other's throats from the start. Molly's vision of gourmet milkshakes clashed violently with Anthony's plan for an extravagant lobster and truffle burger. Their spat over whether milkshakes could be considered gourmet devolved into a shouting match that had the camera crew ducking for cover. Their dishes were a disaster. The milkshakes curdled, and the lobster burger was an unholy mess. The judges, barely stifling their laughter, delivered scathing critiques. It was a humiliating defeat, and both Anthony and Molly stormed off in different directions, each blaming the other for the fiasco. Behind the scenes, the producers couldn't be happier. The drama was ratings gold, but for Anthony and Molly, the constant conflict was wearing thin. They were exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and their professional pride was taking a hit. It was during this low point that a twist of fate forced them into an unlikely alliance. A celebrity guest was scheduled for the next episode, a beloved, no-nonsense culinary legend known for her tough love and impeccable standards. If Anthony and Molly thought they had it rough before, they were in for a rude awakening. The guest chef, a formidable presence in her 60s with a reputation for reducing grown men to tears, made it clear she wouldn't tolerate their antics. Faced with a common enemy, Anthony and Molly were forced to cooperate. The challenge was to create a perfect 5-course meal, with each course representing a different decade of culinary history. Under the watchful eye of their guest, they had no choice but to set aside their differences and focus on the task at hand. The first course, a 1950s-inspired shrimp cocktail, saw them working side by side, surprisingly in sync. Anthony prepped the shrimp, while Molly perfected the cocktail sauce. Their hands brushed occasionally, each touch a reminder of the unspoken tension that had always been there. As they moved through the decades, 1960s coq au vin, 1970s fondue, 1980s sushi, and 1990s tiramisu, they found a rhythm, each course more harmonious than the last. The guest chef, initially skeptical, began to soften. She saw potential in their partnership, recognizing that their clashes were fueled by passion and perhaps something deeper. By the end of the challenge, Anthony and Molly had created a meal that was not only passable but genuinely impressive. The guest chef's praise was hard-won, and the sense of accomplishment they felt was unlike anything they had experienced before. Their newfound cooperation didn't go unnoticed. The producers, ever the schemers, decided to capitalize on this unexpected development. The next episodes were designed to test their fragile truce, pushing them into situations that required trust and collaboration. A high-pressure cooking class for amateurs, a charity bake-off, and a surprise ingredient challenge all forced them to rely on each other. Through these trials, their relationship began to evolve. The animosity that had once defined their interactions gave way to a grudging respect, and from there to a tentative friendship. They started to learn from each other. Anthony's daring techniques tempered by Molly's meticulous attention to detail, and Molly's practicality enriched by Anthony's creative flair. There were still moments of conflict, of course. During the charity bake-off, Anthony's attempt at a flamboyant croquembouche nearly collapsed, saved at the last minute by Molly's quick thinking. The surprise ingredient challenge saw them bickering over the best way to incorporate durian into a dessert, a debate that ended with both of them gagging at the smell but laughing at the absurdity of the situation. In these lighter moments, they began to see each other not as adversaries but as partners. The walls they had built around themselves started to crumble, revealing vulnerabilities and strengths they had never acknowledged. The audience watched, captivated, as the dynamic duo transformed from bitter rivals to a team with undeniable chemistry. The producers of Chef's Special sensed that something had shifted between Anthony and Molly. The fiery tension that once fueled their clashes had simmered into a more tantalizing heat. With ratings still climbing, they devised the perfect finale, a high-stakes cooking challenge that would put everything Anthony and Molly had learned about working together to the ultimate test. The final challenge was a romantic dinner for two, but with a twist. They had to prepare the meal in a remote, picturesque location, with limited ingredients and no advanced preparation. The producers chose a secluded beach, the waves crashing against the shore providing a dramatic backdrop. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the scene, Anthony and Molly arrived, ready for whatever the challenge threw at them. The limited ingredients were laid out: fresh seafood, tropical fruits, a variety of herbs and spices, and some basic pantry staples. They had to create a three-course meal that captured the essence of romance. As the clock started, they fell into their now familiar rhythm, each movement synchronized, every decision a collaboration. For the appetizer, they decided on a light and refreshing ceviche, using the seafood and citrus fruits. Anthony expertly filleted the fish, while Molly prepared the marinade, their hands brushing occasionally, sending sparks of electricity between them. Their laughter mingled with the sound of the waves as they worked, the atmosphere lighter and more playful than ever before. The main course was a grilled seafood platter with a tropical salsa. Molly handled the grilling, her face glowing in the firelight, while Anthony concocted a salsa that balanced sweetness and heat perfectly. They teased each other about their grilling techniques, the banter flowing easily, a reflection of how far they had come. As they plated the main course, the sky turned a deep shade of indigo, stars beginning to twinkle above them. The setting was impossibly romantic, the kind of place where confessions of love seemed destined to happen. But both Anthony and Molly were still focused on the task, their hearts pounding with more than just the pressure of the competition. For dessert, they chose a simple yet decadent tropical fruit parfait with layers of creamy coconut and tart passion fruit. They worked side by side, assembling the parfaits with care, their hands occasionally touching, each contact lingering a little longer than necessary. The air was thick with anticipation, every glance and touch charged with unspoken emotion. With their dishes complete, they sat down at a small table set up on the beach, the waves gently lapping at the shore. The judges tasted their creations, nodding in approval and exchanging knowing looks. When it came time to deliver the verdict, it was clear that Anthony and Molly had not only created a stunning meal, but had also captivated everyone with their undeniable chemistry. The judges left, giving them some privacy to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Anthony and Molly sat in silence for a moment, the realization of what they had accomplished sinking in. The tension that had simmered between them throughout the competition now hung heavy in the air, begging for resolution. Molly, always the more practical of the two, finally broke the silence. She looked at Anthony, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the moonlight, and spoke with a vulnerability that surprised even herself. She admitted how much she had grown to respect and admire him, how their rivalry had pushed her to be better, and how she couldn't imagine her life without the chaos he brought. Anthony, usually so brash and confident, was uncharacteristically quiet. He reached across the table, taking Molly's hand in his touch gentle but firm. He confessed that behind his arrogance was a deep-seated fear of not being good enough, and that Molly's unwavering determination and skill had challenged him in ways he never thought possible. She had become his muse, his partner in more ways than one. Their confessions hung in the air, a delicate tension stretching between them. Unable to resist any longer, Anthony stood and pulled Molly into his arms, the sound of the ocean their only witness. He looked into her eyes, his heart pounding, and leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. Molly responded with equal fervor, all the pent-up emotions of their journey spilling over in that moment. The kiss deepened, their surroundings fading away as they lost themselves in each other. The world seemed to hold its breath, the stars shining a little brighter, the waves a little gentler. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through and everything they had yet to discover about each other. When they finally broke apart, they were breathless, their foreheads touching, smiles playing on their lips. Anthony, ever the showman, couldn't resist a final quip. He teased Molly about how their partnership was like a perfect recipe, each ingredient bringing out the best in the other, creating something truly special. Molly laughed, swatting him playfully, but her eyes shone with happiness. They stayed on the beach long after the cameras stopped rolling, wrapped in each other's arms, sharing dreams and plans for the future. The rivalry that had once defined them was now just a memory, replaced by a partnership built on respect, admiration, and an undeniable chemistry that promised a lifetime of adventure. As the night wore on, they danced under the stars, the sand cool beneath their feet, the ocean a soothing lullaby. It was the perfect ending to their story, a blend of laughter, love, and a little bit of magic, just like the best recipes. And as they held each other close, they knew that their journey was only beginning, with countless more chapters waiting to be written, each one sweeter than the last.